Hello, everybody. Welcome to this year's first edition of BlackBook Motorsport Direct. I hope you're all well. I'm your host, Peter Jones, the Executive Director here at BlackBook Motorsport, bringing you more great discussions with the figures that help shape motorsport. Now, as we move through 2023, there'll be a lot of exciting events for our members, from our virtual networking sessions to our seasonal and in-person receptions. However, all eyes and ears are, of course, on the long-awaited return of our flagship in-person event, the BlackBook Motorsport Forum. And this is taking place very soon, in under 5 weeks' time, on the 27th of April at the iconic and historic Kia Oval Stadium in London. So this is the 9th edition of this flagship conference for global motorsport, and we'll see the likes of Oracle, Red Bull Racing, World Rally Championship, the Saudi Arabian and Bahrain Grand Prix, AWS, Formula E, and many more, discussing the transformation that motorsport is going through. And we've actually got some good news for you. If you have decided to join us today, we will be rewarding all BlackBook Direct attendees with an exclusive 30% off pass to the BlackBook Motorsport Forum on the 27th of April. So please do get in touch with us to redeem this offer if you want to attend and network with the best motorsport has to offer. The tickets are very limited, so you'll be able to find a little bit more information on this and how to register in the chat box. Now, we do have a short video reel, I believe, to show you all about our flagship live conference for motorsport stakeholders. Don't know whether we've got any technical issues with playing that video. Maybe we do, so I will move on. I can just guarantee you it's a phenomenal event, and hopefully that you can join us, and the offer still stands. So very quickly, moving on to today's event and the start, I'd like to share with you some important information to maximize your experience watching today. Firstly, we do strongly recommend that you use the latest version of Google Chrome and have minimal tabs open. Also, if anybody will be tweeting today, please remember to use @motorsportbb, and the hashtag is BBMDirect. Sessions are always recorded and they'll be made available to you after the event should you want to rewatch or share with anybody at any point. I'm sure most of you have possibly attended one of these before. We've done many over the last 3 years, so I'm not going to waste your time talking through the ins and outs, but there is a questions tab that can be found on the right-hand side or the bottom of your screen. Please do populate your questions here throughout the show, and our moderator will do the best to come to them either during the show or towards the end. Obviously, if you've got any issues or concerns with the platform, please use the chat feature and our production team will be able to help you out with any technical issues. But on to today's event. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. We're looking at the growth of racing in the USA and looking at international motorsport's new home. So the spotlight, at least for F1, has been on its breakthrough with US audiences, and there's no better place that can be seen as a catalyst for this growth than the Circuit of the Americas, hosting the United States Grand Prix for for over a decade now. And there's one man responsible, at least in part, for the resurrection of Formula One in the United States by creating a world-class sports and entertainment facility to host it. But I won't be the one introducing him. I will leave this introduction to our moderator today, someone whose voice you may be familiar with, having presented and commentated with the likes of Formula One, BBC, and quite a few more. I'm, of course, talking about our friend Harry Benjamin. So without further delay, over to you, Harry, to start the show.
Thank you very much, Peter. Well, firstly, thank you for having me as well. First time doing this, so a pleasure to be involved. And to Bobby Epstein, the CEO of the Circuit of Americas, who joins us for this chat about everything that Peter has just mentioned. Don't forget, as Peter said as well, you can get a question and I'll make sure we try and get as many answered as possible over the course of, about the next hour or so. My name is Harry Benjamin. I work for BBC 5 Live doing their F1 coverage, F1 TV, Ferrari Challenge, MotoGP as well. So I can't wait to chat to Bobby about everything going on. Bobby, welcome, first of all. Where are you joining us today? You at the track?
Yeah, I'm at the track. I'm in my office.
I didn't want to presume. I mean, you were actually saying just before, it must be quite busy at the moment. You've got some NASCAR teams pulling up as we speak.
We do. We have a whole line of probably a half mile long of the big rigs and the cabs that are bringing in everything for the NASCAR event this weekend. We have a Cup Series event, and we're pretty excited about it. We've got some great drivers in it. We have Jensen Button and Kimi Räikkönen participating, so we're excited about that. And we know the drivers are excited about driving on this circuit. So it's always fun to see.
Absolutely. Now, it must be a busy start for you nonetheless. Obviously, Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. It must be one of the highlights of your year as well. How have you enjoyed the start of the F1 season so far in 2023?
I like the start of every F1 season. We're just happy to see it back in the spotlight. And you'd like a little more competition in terms of you're disappointed, obviously, with it's not so much Mercedes, the fact that they're not contending, but you'd like to see as many cars as you can vying for the lead. But it's great to see our friend in Mexico nearby. We're pretty close to Mexico here, and we have a lot of fans that come up. So for us to see that competition, that's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Now, I want to start at the very beginning, if I may, in terms of how COTA came to be, and I suppose how your involvement came around. You worked in the world of finance before. How did you get involved in F1?
Well, it's a pretty unusual roundabout way. I can't say I was an avid diehard F1 fan because it's very hard to follow the sport, in the U.S. until more recently. And so I had some land near the airport, actually. And the question was, this is a result of the housing market crisis. when land values were no longer useful for homes, and Austin was a fast-growing city, and I had this piece of property, my only real estate investment, actually. And the idea came up about the possibility of bringing Formula One to Austin. And I really thought this is a great opportunity to do something for the community, for where we live, as well as something that we could make a profit on, and we'd have some fun with, and would make a big difference. And we got part of it right. It took several years to get to the. It's not as fun when it's not profitable, so that took a little while. But I grew up spending my summers in Indianapolis. I collected all the. I only want to drink out of the glass that had the every year's winners of the Indy 500 on it, and so when F1 came to Dallas in the early '80s, I saved up and bought a ticket to go to see that at the time. And so, casual fan, hard to follow the sport from the U.S., but always knew of it and liked it. And really looked at this as an opportunity. We're in a great location. Why does F1 make sense in Austin? Why is it good for Austin? Why would Austin be good for the sport? And the more we talked about it and thought about it, we really looked at this as an opportunity to build a world-class entertainment destination. And with F1 as the cornerstone, gives us a wonderful brand to start with, and brought crowds right away. So really our goal for the campus is to make this a place where people want to come and have fun and build memories with friends and family, and F1 is one part of that overall picture.
Well, it certainly does seem every year it gets bigger and better every time. But during those early discussions about the possibility of F1 coming to Austin, Texas, were you a little bit tentative, given the previous US Grand Prix at Indianapolis wasn't the most popular, and I suppose F1 was still trying to crack America at the time?
Yeah, I think they'd given up on cracking America in many ways. If I talked to Bernie, I think it was a potential thing on the checklist that maybe would be a nice to have, not must have, and didn't really have a lot of faith in its success here. Was probably doing it more from pressure. So I'm glad they now want to crack America and are really heavily focused on it, and they're being successful, which we had to prove ourselves very early on, and I think we did okay at that. But it was tough. And realistically, though, and this is a real Bernie thing that I think anyone that was around him would appreciate, he wasn't so interested in where the race would be or who would run the race. He was only interested, he would say, as long as the check clears. you know.
Sounds like a Bernie answer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, clearly it certainly has been going well over the last few years, but obviously there has been some major challenges, particularly with the likes of the COVID cancellations, and you of course had terrible flooding to name some of the most impactful over the last decade with COTA. How have you as a business learned from those challenges and moving forward for those?
Well, we learned a couple of things. One, we learned that we couldn't rely on this being just a motorsports event. That early on, we came in and we brought a lot of people that had history in the racing business or the racing world, and we found out that wasn't going to sustain us in the traditional F1 audience, which wasn't big enough in the U.S. to support us in the long run. Wasn't where we should be looking and where we should be focusing. What we needed to focus on was creating an event, not so much a race. And once we shifted our focus, I think, away from it being really so much not just about the sport, because we already knew we had a track, a circuit that the fans would appreciate and the drivers would appreciate, but really focus on how you make an event that's something for everyone, entertainment all around, and something that the motorsports fan could bring the casual fan, and they would both have a great time. And that was the only way we were going to convert people to become motorsports fans. It was sort of a soft sell, an indirect way of doing it. And so by adding all the other things, it kind of created the right chemistry and formula to create a great event. And I think that's part of the shift. And then, you know, there's difficulties in being an outdoor venue, and that's just the nature of it. Some of those fixes were very easy. I mean, we found out it takes you a few years when you have a 3-mile campus to even notice where traffic flow is going to be of people, where they want to walk and where they want to cut the curb. And you look at the grass and see, all right, everybody's walking across this grass, it's turning to mud. These are very simple things to fix and to focus on. And from us, we don't have to focus on the racing. We don't create the track action. What we create is a fan experience. And so we really just made sure we focused on the fans and the fan experience. And a lot of these things are simple, very straightforward. And you just have to do a good job and execute and rely on the people that are doing it. When you have 7,000 or 8,000 employees a day for a big F1 race, you are taking your chances in a lot of ways. And you're going to get some percentage of the people that are wonderful, and others that you're playing the odds on, and they're not familiar with the venue, and it's tough for them. So we really learned a lot about putting on events.
Well, you sort of answered my next question there, but I want to get a kind of maybe percentage from you, because particularly within the F1 landscape, there's always been that slight divide, I think, with those who consume it as pure sport and those who are there for the entertainment and want to be entertained. If you could put a percentage on it, then, you know, sport versus entertainment, how much do you value, what value do you place on that? I mean, COTA clearly looks at the entertainment side of things. You know, you've just been nominated as for best motorsport race, haven't you, by USA Today? You've got an association with Live Nation and your own music venue. So clearly, as you've already said, that entertainment side is massive. But if you could put a percentage on it, could you?
Yeah, the diehard fans that would buy tickets. And I think you could ask this of any of the motorsports events. You see it. I'll get to your answer. It's probably 15 to 20% of our attendance would be the diehard motorsport fans that would come back. And I think you can't. It's not so easy as an apples to apples comparison as it might be, say, in IndyCar, where in Indianapolis, 1 week you have 250,000 people, and you take the exact same product and you put it in a different but similar venue, but a different location, and you see that attendance is 10 or 15% of what it might have been, or less sometimes. That tells you that's sort of the difference between the diehard fan and the event fan. And I think we saw that too in what our attendance was doing before we added in the music and the other programming and really shifted away. It's not that we don't offer, I think, the best experience for the diehard motorsport fan, but as the case in any sport, you're going to have to appeal to what I'll call the second tier below the diehard fan, the one who it's not their hobby and it's not their passion. Like many of the people on this at your event, that we're absolutely living, breathing diehard fans of the sports, of motorsports, but those sports aren't going to survive on our interest alone. it's going to have to be a step down of interest to the casual fan, who is also a fan of an event and want to be a part of it. And so if we care about the health of the sports overall, which we do, I think we have to offer more. We know with our circuit that, and this isn't any credit to me, and our people, it goes to the architects, right, and the designers. Now, we gave them free reign and gave them some choice to pick the property that they thought they could make the most interesting track out of. And it was important to us to have two things. One was a circuit that's incredibly challenging and fun for the drivers, so that it would make interesting racing. We know that's great for TV. And you might have a street circuit that's like that, but it's flat in most cases, which then says maybe that's not the best for the fans. And what we were able to do, and where our input came in a lot, was on using the hills, so that if you're a diehard motorsports fan, you'll notice if you come to COTA, and you'll hopefully go away and say, that was the best sight line, that was the best view, I saw some action because of the hills. And you can see a lot of these hills, you can see 5 or 6 turns from a general admission seat, and you can see 7 or 8 or 9 from the reserve seats. That's unusual, and the diehard fan will recognize that as unusual. The casual fan will just accept it, but they will notice. Let me see one thing. Are we still here?
I think I'm still here. Are you still here?
I'm still here, but it's flashing on my screen to tell me to log in. Okay, good. Well, anyway,
we'll carry on nonetheless.
yeah. I can't see any of us, but that's okay. But anyway, I think that we have to recognize that the percentage of people that are the diehard fans is not enough to sustain the sport alone, or any of the motorsport events. The sport itself might survive on TV, but we have to talk about what's the future, not just of motorsport, but what's the future of motorsport venues and the sports themselves. And so hopefully, I hope we've done a good job of utilizing the venue. And I think
absolutely. Well, those are some big questions you pose. What happens after every race, particularly obviously Formula One? Do you sit down as a team? Do you think, right, what went wrong? How can we evolve this for next year? You know, I imagine you mentioned there's some big plans, but that can't all happen within the space of a year. How do you see the key to success in evolving year on year?
We've got a great team here. We have, if you have 8,000 people working on race day, we have about 120 people who work year round to prepare for that day, that each have different areas that they oversee. And after we give them a couple days to sleep, after a big event, we absolutely get together, and you focus on what went wrong often. And I like to grab ourselves once in a while and say, let's focus also on what we did right, so that we can then come back and make sure we repeat those things. But there's a pretty intense period where we're doing that. But like our music guys are already working on 2024. In fact, conversations and already happening for that. So the planning starts so far in advance. A lot of your mistakes are going to be made 6 months or 9 months ahead of time. And so you have to do what you just talked about, which is you have to immediately dive back in to what are we going to do for next year, because it's fresh in your mind, and the planning has to start way in advance.
Absolutely. Well, I want to come on to talking about the wider landscape in America at the moment when it comes to Formula One. But we've had a couple of questions come in, so I'm just going to see if I can get them up onto the screen. This one is from Tom Brown to begin with. So if I click that, hopefully you should be able to see it. Asks, in the decade or so since the first F1 Grand Prix at COTA, what knock-on positive impacts have you seen in the local community and the city of Austin?
Yeah. Well, I think we had a lot of resistance in our first year. Not that much different than where I saw an article. I don't know why this triggers it, but I saw an article yesterday where Las Vegas is talking about calling in the National Guard for F1 weekend to help them make sure they keep order. That's not unusual. Our first years, we had a lot of people leave town because they were hearing about the masses that would come in and the traffic jams that would happen. And so people were very skeptical. And now we're embraced. And we're embraced for a couple of reasons. And one is that you do make a wonderful impact. There's nothing better for a hotel or a restaurant to have people with the fullest pockets come to town and empty them out and leave. Like that's a great impact. And it has a wonderful lasting effect. And the other is what we've been able to do with the circuit the rest of the year to connect with the community. And I think that's an important thing, whether it's Tuesday night, last night, we do bike night where the community can come out and ride their bikes on the track. And we have 1,000 people to come out and do that, or whether we use the venue for mass vaccinations. So you do a lot of good in the community, and you both financially and interactively. And I think that's been a big difference. So the city and the community have embraced us much more. I would say if we were a politician with an approval rating, we start out pretty low, and we've gone in the right direction, and hopefully we sustain that. And we sustain it because the people that come for F1, they're wonderful visitors. I mean, we have a great, I think if you look at the fans of the sport, I think they're great people to have visiting your city. And I think our city's welcoming. So part of it works because Austin's great. And I think the people that are coming actually are a great, when you think about who can descend upon your city and what those audiences are, F1's a great group.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tom, for asking that question. If there's one thing that people say when they come back from COTA, it's certainly that they have fun in the local town. So that certainly is something to be proud of. Now, thank you for your questions coming on scene, and we will get to them, I promise. I just want to move on, though, to talk a little bit, obviously, about Miami and Las Vegas coming on to the calendar. Miami in its second year, Las Vegas its first year on the calendar this season. 3 American races on the calendar, long-term deals. Miami and Vegas, both international tourist destinations. Do you think there's room for 3? Are you happy there's 3? Would you like even more?
Oh, I'm happy if there's less. Sometimes competition's good. So as long as there's enough fans, we can have a lot more. But I think our goal is to always be unique and stand out and and focus on the fans and just do the best we can. I do think the fan base, for the ticket buying fan base, we have to be careful and make sure there's enough fans in the U.S. to buy tickets to sustain it as a venue. Whether it could certainly sustain more races from a TV standpoint. And if you were just looking at the TV ratings, which may be a fine business plan, that's not my business plan, but you can do more races if going through New York or Chicago or any place. If you're relying mainly on TV revenue, you may not care so much. What I think you do have to focus on, though, is, and I think the fans are pretty smart, is the quality of the racing. And I think we have a circuit that's built for competition. It's not necessarily. I think as I said, I think we have advantages over others. So I welcome the competition from that standpoint. And I do think the fans that choose to be repeat visitors will choose to come to COTA because we have an advantage. I mean, we were built for racing. The Strip in Vegas was not necessarily built for racing, but it's a fun place. It is, as you say, it's an international world-class destination. It's going to make great TV. I don't know how long people will go back and buy tickets for it, but they're obviously competitors, so I think we have an advantage, but I really do. I think there's a difference, but all 3 events right now are so uniquely different that they all 3 can survive.
So obviously they're competitors, but if they asked you for some advice, what would you say?
Well, are we talking? I mean, the advice is I don't know that mine matters so much, which is a good thing for them. But there's some things you can't change. I mean, you can't suddenly put hills. And I think elevation changes mean a lot for racing, in Formula One in particular. I think that's one of the great things, and be able to make a competitive course where we weren't constrained by existing facilities. And so there's an advantage there. So those would be the first things I would probably advise someone in doing a circuit, is how to make it interesting and how to make it fan friendly on top of it, which is the ability to see a lot and engage. So I think that the advice for street races, I don't have that. That's not my specialty. But you've already got wonderful cities, great destinations that people want to go to. And I think Austin is a great destination. I think the fans that come do like it, but it's not a natural when someone says, where am I taking my vacation? I mean, Miami Beach and Vegas, those are fantastic places to go. And I plan vacations there too. So I don't blame people when they want to go there.
No. Well, we mentioned obviously there's obviously an appetite, right, for racing in America right now, particularly in Formula One. Attendances, as we spoke about, are at an all-time high. TV viewership is going up and up, and especially in the US, it's multiplied. What can you put that down to? There's a lot of talk about the Netflix effect and Drive to Survive, but naturally, has that had an impact on wider motorsports as well, or is it confined to Formula One for you?
It's challenged the other motorsports. It hasn't helped them, but it's given them perhaps a roadmap to success that they're going to seek and try, and I hope succeed at. But there's no question Netflix has reached that next tier that I said we really need for it to be sustaining, especially for venues and ticket buyers. Is that casual fan that came in because of Netflix, and it really allowed the sport to explode. It has a lot of the sport was always great, but you didn't know what was under the helmets or inside the car and driving it. And you had to connect with personalities. People, I would say in general, don't connect with machines. Yesterday, our company, we watched a Red Bull video called The Life of a Bolt. If you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. I just gave them a good plug there to go watch it, click it, check it out. But it's an incredible example of just how wonderful the machinery is and what goes into making these vehicles and to make the cars. But people don't connect with it. And you know what they connected with? They connected with the personalities. And that's going to be sustaining. If you look at what did they find in that series? They found personalities. In many cases, they were able to also understand the danger that's in the sport that you wouldn't have otherwise tuned into. It's another hook, which is similar to what we were doing here with the venue in getting the serious motorsport fan to bring a friend and hope their friend gets hooked on it. So I think that's what the Netflix series did.
Yeah, well, let's talk sustainability. You make it sound like you think this is a sustainable market for the US, certainly, but with its current growth, it is expanding rapidly. Is it sustainable, or is there an element of we're sort of all going with the rush, and then it's going to perhaps go on a decline?
Well, I think it's sustainable. Look at let's say we do believe the Netflix effect is real and that it's been tremendous, and say what are the components of that? One is the danger and excitement. That's not going to change. I think Survivor's been on TV 20 plus years. That has that thrill effect to it. And then I think The Bachelor, I know my girls would tell you The Bachelor's been on for probably 20 plus seasons also. And that has sort of the heartthrob romance sex appeal. That's what you got in F1. I mean, that's what the people are tuning in for. And that had a lot of legs, 20 plus seasons. So the outlook from the Netflix effect standpoint should be really strong, and it'll continue it for a long time. And then I think I'd ask about what about the events, not just the sport, but what's the sustainability of the events and why do people go? Because that's what we focus on. Are we going to be here 5 and 10, 15 years from now? And I think one of the hardest things to buy, or what you can't buy, is tradition. And you look at some sporting events and ask, why are they still around? Now, some of them, Indianapolis 500, why does it draw so many people? Or the Kentucky Derby, or some of these events that were around before TV, right? People had to go to experience them, and it became a tradition. It becomes a family tradition. And once you have tradition, that's sort of a great fuel to take you forward for a lot of years. And I think one thing COTA has, because it had a head start, let's say, on the other events that are taking place in the US, is we have found now that there's a tradition to families coming back, and we see it in our repeat visitors. So I think we'll get sustained because we've created an atmosphere that people want to come back to. And then for the sports themselves, as I said, I think what they offer, and with the Netflix type connection, the future's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it sounds great on both fronts. You almost want to offer those family childhood moments that people look back on and go, well, I was standing at the top at turn 1 in the grandstand, and that's when I first fell in love with Formula One at COTA in Austin. You have a whole new generation suddenly who are now suddenly lifelong Formula One fans from both aspects. Talking of sustainability, but in an environmental front, we've had quite a few questions coming in. I want to start with this one from Kian. Do you have any further sustainability initiatives planned for 2023 following last year's focus on reducing single-use plastics?
That's a great question. And it's something, aside from motorsports, we all face as, I think, humanity. And so I'm glad that it comes up, and I think it should come up more often. And the consumer drives that to some very large extent, right? If I put out, and we actually went through this, and this morning I drank my drink was in a wax carton of water, and we have to train the consumer to be willing to pay the higher price for not single-use plastics. And right now, you also have to get the manufacturers to make enough. So when we go through 1 million bottles of water over the weekend of the race weekend, first of all, for us to get the supply that I think we need to be able to do that, you also need to have the vendor willing to sell you something that's not 3 times the higher price. So there's challenges in doing that. I could get into a lot of detail of why getting away from single-use plastic at major events is not as easy as I'd like it to be. But we'll continue to make an effort in that, and I think you'll see us make progress. And it's one thing we're demanding of our vendors. So, and I think you see that in the packaging of the foods. Like, we don't let anyone, we rely a lot on food trucks to come in and provide. We don't have kitchens for that many, but anybody who wants to package it in plastic, we've told them that's not okay. So I think we're down to where we use fountain drinks as much as we can. It's the water bottles that I struggle with, and really encourage Coca-Cola and Pepsi and anyone who's selling them to not make it so that the consumer, we get obviously the finger points. You're selling a $5 bottle of water, but there's a lot behind that, and the costs need to come down. The consumer needs to be willing to pay more for it, and I think it's on all of us to do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that question. And actually, just as a follow-up from that question, to push you a little bit further on this from Alid, further to the Kian's question, how do COTA tend to try and win the F1 award for most sustainable Grand Prix of 2023? Obviously, that is up for grabs. I'm sure there's certain criteria you have to fill. Is there anything in addition to what you've just said on that?
I'm not even aware of the sustainability award, but we have a sustainability officer on our staff full time. I mean, this is an important position. I think if you look at Austin, you compare it to most other cities in the US, you'll find that the city itself has a huge focus on sustainability and leading the way in that. I'm shocked we haven't won that award. If you're telling me there is that, because we got the MotoGP award. I got a plaque over there that they presented us for a nice sustainability one. So I got to look into that. They need to look into that qualifications, because we should be winning that. The amount of recycling we do, and the carbon offset, not buying carbon offset, but just, we've tried to discourage cars and encourage busing to reduce the footprint and the things we do year round here, whether bringing attention. I don't know if you saw this, but with Sebastian last race, we really wanted to call attention to what he's done to say the planet is important to me and sustainability is important. And so we planted trees as a symbolic measure for that. I don't know if you notice that, but if you look at it, you'll find out that we planted something called Bettel's Grove. And we really did it to bring attention to and the awareness, not just to the cause itself of the planet, but to also salute him for his efforts to encourage more people to step forward and do that and bring attention to the needs. And then what isn't noticed is that 2 weeks ago, we planted 500 trees around that at a grove in the park that's just a mile away here. Our employees got the morning off to go over and everyone plant trees, and we planted 500 trees in honor of Sebastian and his career and what it meant towards showing a leadership and a commitment to the planet.
Does that mean we might get a Sebastian Vettel appearance at the Grand Prix this year?
I hope that'd be nice.
He's got to see his grove.
You know what? He's a great guy too, because when we did this, he also told us he would match, I think, the purchase of a matched amount of trees to be planted, and that's not inexpensive. And I think he didn't get a lot of recognition for that. But if you go back and look at what he said when we presented him with that, he said, "I want to match this and double the number." And I think no one picked that up, and that's just the kind of guy he is.
Well, it's amazing to hear those initiatives that are being put in place. You mentioned MotoGP there as well. Obviously, COTA is not just home to Formula One, but MotoGP as well. You also host NASCAR, as we said right at the start. You've had IndyCar there and World Endurance Championship 2 in the past, along with multiple other forms of single-seater and GT racing. What would be your ideal? Could we see them all back in action again? I know IndyCar and WEC aren't there at the moment. Would you like everybody back there racing?
Well, I'd like to see sure. Yeah, I would. It's going to mean that what that would mean, right? I'm a venue. I'm the theater. So to see everyone back here racing would mean that those sports have succeeded in building a fan base that will buy tickets, because that's not our job. We don't have the budget, or we don't get the TV revenue, and we don't build sport, right? We put on events. And if you see all those back here, it's because they're selling enough tickets for the promoter to make it worthwhile, or because they value the competition that COTA creates on the track, which I think, as you see, the reasons that you see some of the drivers that are participating this weekend in NASCAR, it's because they want to drive the circuit. And so when the drivers ask for it, that helps a lot. And when the fans ask for it, they're showing it with their support usually by buying tickets. So yeah, I'd love to see them back here. I think you will see another one of the names that you mentioned back here in the next year. But from our standpoint, we need the fans to show up. And right now, there's no question that Formula One and NASCAR and MotoGP dominate. Our MotoGP sales this year are fantastic. That event's coming up in a month, and it's the best we've seen in 5 years.
Well, actually, on that, Randy has asked a question. I'll just get it up. How would you contrast the challenge of hosting F1 versus something like MotoGP?
That's another good question. I think it's the MotoGP fans are probably the most connected and most devoted to their sport and to the riders. And maybe that's because they're not behind the wheel. I haven't really thought that through, but maybe it's because they connect to the person a little bit more. But they're the most educated fans on their sport. And we don't, you get a lot more track, you get a lot more action, you get a lot more danger, and people can really connect to the risk that the MotoGP rider is taking. And so they want to see that in person. And I think MotoGP is one of the sports, and there are probably few, if I really think about it, that are better in person than they really are on TV. Like, I think people come for RF1 because of the event and because they can see a lot. But MotoGP is by far, to me, better in person. And so that sort of works for itself. Hold on. You're still there, right?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not that different than what's happening with soccer in the U.S. Soccer attendance at the stadiums is pretty good, but TV, it's not as great. So MotoGP, I think people have found they have to really come to experience it. And so for us, it makes it easier. MotoGP is easier to put on than F1. It really is.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Randy, for that question. We've got a bit of time now, so I'll delay my last question. So we'll get it stuck into some of the questions that have been sent in, shall we? Let's go with this one first from Nicolas. Do you plan to have fast chargers at your facilities in the public area as well as in the paddock for future electric race vehicles, perhaps? Or I suppose just to help your sustainability initiatives for those turning up with electric vehicles?
Yeah, I'm plugged in.
You're plugged in, fully plugged in.
We do have, the answer is yes. I think electric race vehicles charging in the paddock, there's probably less demand for it. There's almost no demand for it right now. Let's say that. Those that do come, we have here's the solutions I found. The demand is in the parking lots right now. We don't have a lot of electric vehicles racing on the circuit because really the technology behind electric racing vehicles, I think all of us would acknowledge until a few years ago, wasn't so great for the hills, and it really drained them fast. But we've got 80 RV spots that have 30 amp and 50 amp hookups that people are using to charge them. So I feel like we have about 80 charging stations. They're not in the paddock, so that's a good thing we should look at. And I'm going to I'll talk to our motorsports guys just about, are there people that we're disappointing by not having it? And maybe you're asking the question because you are one of those people. So feel free to let us know that, but we'll pay attention to the demand and put it in. There is, I can tell you because I'm using it, there are 2 chargers in the paddock now.
Good to hear. Okay. We've got another one on the theme of sustainability. Obviously, it's a huge talking point in the current day. This one is from Ida. In terms of making hosting an event such as F1 financially sustainable for a circuit and also to provide value for money to diehard and casual fans, how important is it to populate the support bill with races? Las Vegas has decided it will go without support races.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think it's important. I think you have to look at the type of support races sometimes also, but the fan's going to answer that question. We're going to find that out because yes, Vegas is much more like dinner and a great show and than probably the casino or whatever. You got a couple hours of the on-track entertainment, and we're going to find out if people want more than that, because I think they do. And I see that with MotoGP, and the fans, the stands do fill up for a lot of the MotoGP support races more than they have on some of the F1 races. I think we saw the women's series really struggle. The W series struggled as a support race. The fans didn't go to the seats and they didn't really watch it enough. And so maybe that tells me that they're not as important, and I think we'll find out. I hope they're important because it's one of the factors that differentiates us, as you said, with Las Vegas not going forward. We think the fans want a lot of value for their investment, and I think they want more content. And we've got 30 hours of programming, and if we find out that all people needed was 2 hours, we've wasted a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of money. I think the question goes to, do we need more content? And is the support race considered the type of content that the ticket buyer wants? So I'm going to learn that with you. I like to think that they want more content. Now, whether it's support races they want or they want a music concert, we got both, but I'm not sure.
Well, I suppose it will be market research as you go, won't it? You'll see who, bums on seats, who's actually there in the grandstands watching when they come out this year. Thank you, Ida, for that question. This one up next from Matt. I'll just pull it up. What was the biggest difficulty you faced when the circuit opened in 2012 in terms of unexpected snags, operational procedures?
Well, we made a big mistake, not intentionally, but by making F1 the first event in the venue. I would highly recommend, if you have a restaurant, that you start with a couple tables one night and some friends that don't care if a lot of stuff goes wrong, because you learn a lot. And because of the timing of where we wanted to get on the calendar, the venue got finished, as have many first-year F1 races, just prior to the race. So I think about it operationally, because you asked about what unexpected snags. You don't expect a sewer pipe to be backed up with construction debris and explode in the main grandstand. Those are the kind of things that we as operators, we're dealing with. We're not dealing with the sport. We're dealing with execution and operational snags. So, I think pathways, as they say, you really don't know the traffic pattern people are going to choose to walk. They sound minor, but they're not. They're major things about figuring out what is the behavior going to be of your guest. And so those are things I'm not sure we could have fixed unless we did a lot of pre-event, smaller things with crowds. But yeah, that's the part. It's hard to anticipate. So most of my answers to you have little to do with the racing itself, but more about parking lots and traffic. And
well, I think that's really interesting for a lot of people. And the restaurant analogy you used there is brilliant. But also, you said earlier, you're the theatre, you're the venue, so it's not up to you to make sure that the show that goes on, that's F1 side, that's MotoGP side, to make sure that actually runs as it should do, and then you're the sort of place where it happens, so you can only do as much as you can on that side, I suppose. Can that be a bit of a frustration at times?
Well, where it can be a frustration is, the Paddock Club we don't have anything to do with that from an execution standpoint. There are other things. There are other groups that put on events that are sanctioned groups by F1 that might create F1 experiences or things like that. What's frustrating for us would be when those groups don't execute well. It reflects on us, and it comes back to us, and we get the complaint letters when those are areas we don't touch. So I think that's the only really frustrating part, would be that a guest experience be affected by another group that's not really the promoter. So, and that's about 10% of the fans that we don't have control over. We do enough things wrong. There's no question. We do a lot right, but it's frustrating when we don't do it well. It's even more frustrating when someone else doesn't do it well.
All right, well, thank you for that. A couple more questions still to get through. We talked about earlier, Sergio Perez, obviously quite popular around that part of the world, with Mexico not too far away. But how did the introduction of the Mexican Grand Prix affect attendances for you?
We know it cost us between $4 and $6 million in year one.
Wow.
And that's a big blow. That's the difference sometimes in teetering between really bad loss and not as bad in those years of a loss. But so it hurt us, really. It did. We're pretty close to Mexico here, obviously, and that was one of the attractive things in my mind about putting the race in Austin and in Texas. And one of the things we talked to F1 about at the time was what was their interest in, what are the possibilities and probability that they would go to Mexico. And they gave us a number that said very low chance. You guys are going to, one of the reasons we're attracted to your location is because we think it's going to satisfy a lot of the Mexican fans. And so I can tell you we've rebounded since then, and now a huge percentage of our fans are from Mexico. And I think the guys in Mexico do a great job with their race. But and I think there is enough demand that we get a lot of spillover. But because our races are so close on the calendar, it's unlikely someone's going to go to both. So we suffered the first year and the second year, but now we see the ticket buyers and we see the number that are coming from Mexico, and it's tremendous. And it doesn't seem to have hurt the Mexican Grand Prix.
So hopefully everyone wins in the end. Thank you for that question. This is another good one from Tom. How big would the impact of an Andretti Cadillac entry be on F1's popularity in the US? And do you think it would help convert a lot of casual US F1 fans to diehard fans? And I suppose, from your perspective, would it get you more ticket sales?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it would be good. It would help some. It might be a one-year phenomenon. That's okay. And so you have to see, what do you do with that opportunity? Because you don't want it to come in with a whimper. And so you're gonna need the support of the F1 community and the racing community. I think it takes away. So before Netflix, you had to look and say, where are we going to get more fans? And you probably are just competing for other motorsport fans, was the way you'd look at it. And if Andretti has a name in IndyCar right now, that's the first fan that would convert over. It's not going to be the casual fan. And as much as I know of Mario from F1, I'm a little older than a lot of the fans that the race series want to connect with. And they don't associate at all Andretti with Formula One. And so, yeah, so anyway, I think it may affect and immediately bring over fans that know of the Andrettis from other race series. Bringing over the casual fan is going to be tough, and they got to capture it in year one, because if you're not winning, then the Americans aren't going to care as much. The passionate diehard fans will, which is part of your question is, though, will the casual US fan take to them? And they will only if they're winning.
So I assume,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just because I assume with, you look at Haas and perhaps Logan Sargent, they're not winning, and at the front, that's the same effect. It hasn't really had that much of a turnover in terms of getting more fans from America involved. I
think that's a great point. I think, has it suddenly catapulted to the forefront? No, it hasn't. But an American winner will make a huge difference with the casual fan, especially one with personality.
Well, one can dream, can't they? Dan has asked this. How can media partners and content agencies better cater to the new casual F1 fans in the US?
Wow.
Is that something you feel like you can answer? I suppose that's what I imagine you work with a lot of agencies and partners naturally. So what do you want from them that will then help you promote the business?
Well, you're talking about getting it off the sports pages and sports websites and getting the stories into lifestyle. And I think F1's done a good job of that in the past and continue to do, because I think, I think you have to look at it as a lifestyle brand. And I think the more that the media does and the content agencies do to focus on that part, I think would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Next
also, I think, sorry, I'll go back to that a little bit.
Yeah,
go beyond lifestyle brands. The technology companies should capitalize on it a lot more than they do, because there is so much technology behind it that is interesting. And the more that the tech brands do get involved, beyond just putting their logo on it, which may be great. Like, that's not my, media dollars of visual exposure, but being a part of it and telling the story behind the technology could better be done maybe in the media than any other way.
Okay, good to know. This is a nice question, I think, which you'll like, from and Matt. How important is non-circuit income and the consideration of other new developments around the venue at Silverstone? With it, there's a whole technology part there. They have a Porsche Experience Center. Many teams from other racing series as well have bases within that technology park. New trackside accommodation. Is that something you look at and think, well, we can do better at that, or not of interest?
Not only can we do better at that, we have to. That's the opportunity for us. And how do you survive? How do venues survive without motorsports events should be one of the first things that everyone deals with. If ticket sales go down, is there a future for motorsports venues? And I think there is, particularly for circuits that are near urban areas, which I can get back to the sustaining revenue of that, because I do think people will get to drive their cars less and less as if we get automated self-driving cars. I think people still want to drive, and I think that's going to attract people to the circuits. And especially as I said, if they're near urban areas and you can make that part of your day, that's going to help those circuits. But there's no question that building ancillary businesses that are complementary to each other and that revolve around the track Silverstone should be an example that we should try for. I'm sort of disappointed that the Andretti facility, I heard, is $200 million is in Indianapolis. It makes sense because that's where they are. But from a standpoint of how would I have made my venue better suited for them and more attractive for them to be here, is something that we did ask ourselves and should ask ourselves. We frankly hadn't done it because we didn't have a lot of the permitting until just before COVID to develop out the campus. These are minor details, but it goes directly to your question about technology park. I think we have conversations going now with 9 tenants. Yesterday we went through it. We had 9 good tenants that were significant anchors for technology park. And then that's from a commercial standpoint. And then from connecting with the drivers and the passionate fans, whether that's car condos or a membership driving club. And each one of those makes the other more successful. And so that's most of my focus right now.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Some excellent questions coming in. Thank you very much. Now we're quickly getting to the end. So I'll ask my final question to you, Bobby. It's been an absolute privilege to hear your thoughts so far. We mentioned MotoGP about a month away now in COTA. It's just over about 6 months, I think, until the F1 is back there. What are your 3 wishes for this year? If it all goes swimmingly well, what are your 3 wishes that you would like to come out by the end of the year?
Well, if we're talking specific MotoGP and F1, or 3 wishes
Whatever.
would be full house first off at all these events, but not just a full house, but that the people go away and say that was great. I had fun. I made a great memory with a friend, and I want to come back. So that's the first wish, is that we do such a great job that people want to come back. I think the other is I want the racing on the track to be exciting and not predictable. I think we have a track made for that. We have to prove that, because with more competition, we have to say, how do we distinguish ourselves? And I think that's the TD viewer will see that, as well as the person who comes. And the other wish, if I got to make 3, so
that's what the genie's giving you.
Is that you guys would have me back next year, because we've done enough right, and it wasn't too boring for everybody.
That sounds like 3 very good wishes, Bobby. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Bobby Epstein, CEO of the Circuit of the Americas. We look forward to seeing how it all pans out this year. Thank you to those who sent in questions as well. But I will hand back to Peter for now.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Harry. Hugely insightful session, and we certainly appreciate the openness and honesty with all the questions that were asked. So thank you to everyone participating. So I'd like to say a big thank you, of course, to Bobby for agreeing to give us his time today and talk through the growth, not only of the United States Grand Prix, but I guess the success of the Circuit of the Americas in general. And we certainly wish Bobby and the entire COTA team every success in the future. And of course, thanks to Harry for his excellent moderation skills today, and also for sharing his strong collection of Paul di Resta racing merchandise in the background that you might have seen. So we look forward to hearing and seeing more of Harry in action in 2023.